నీతో పాటు ఇంకో వంకాయ తయారైంది. శివాని వాట్ ఇస్ దట్?
Namaste, Laliji. Can we start? I'll just talk to you. Namaste to all. Thanks for joining HT Zoom session. Today is the third pravachanam in the series, which will happen on a monthly basis. Thanks to Chiranjeevi Lalit Gannavaram ji for accepting and agreeing for the pravachanam for all HT devotees and Austin community once in a month. Thank you, Lalit ji. Today's topic is Guru Parampara, a primordial chain of knowledge. Lalitji, please go ahead, and thank you again from HT management for doing this for us. Thank you very much, Andy. Please go ahead.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namasabhabhyas sabhapatibhyascha vo namaha. Sada balarupapi vignadrihantri mahadanti vaktrapi panchasya manya vidhindradi ganesha abhidhana vidhattam shriyankapi kalyana murti Vedandasyam giram devim satguroh pada pankajam jagadgurunshcha shringadrishthitan vandertha siddhaye mala sudha kumbha vibodha mudra vidya virajat karavari jatam aparakarunya sudhamburashim shri sharadambam pranatosmi nityam सत्यज्ञानसुखस्वरूपममलं क्षीराब्धिमध्यस्थितं योगारूढमतिप्रसन्नवदनं भूषासहस्रोज्ज्वलं रक्षञ्चक्रपिनाकसाभयवरान् बिभ्राणमर्कच्छविं छत्रीभूतफणीन्द्रमिन्दुधवलं लक्ष्मीन् नृसिंहं भजे गिरां देवी वाणी विमलगुणिनौ मे च पितरौ गुरूत्तंसाः मल्लाप्रगडकुलभूषा मणिबुधः कुटुम्बाख्यः शास्त्री रसिकहृदया ये सहृदयाः निजाशीर्भिः कुर्युः सफलवचसं मां करुणया भारती करुणापात्रं भारती पदभूषणं भारती पदमारूढं भारतीतीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विधुशेखरभारतीम् मौनव्याख्या प्रकटितपरब्रह्मतत्त्वं युवानं वर्षिष्ठान्ते वसदृशिगणैरावृतं ब्रह्मनिष्ठैः आचार्येन्द्रं करकलितचिन्मुद्रमानन्दरूपं स्वात्मा रामं मुदितवदनं दक्षिणामूर्तिमीडे. So with namaskarams to the Guru Parampara and greetings to all of you. So as Uncle said, this is the third session that we're having in the monthly meetings for HT. Because this month we had Vyasa Purnima, Guru Purnima, I thought it would be appropriate for us to talk about the Guru Parampara. We briefly talked about this Parampara during Shankara Jayanti. So when we talked for about 40 minutes or so on that day, we briefly mentioned what made Shankaracharya such a great Guru, such a Jagat Guru. But I thought that because we celebrate Guru Purnima and Vyasa Purnima this month, it would be good for us to talk about exactly what the overall structure of our Guru Parampara is, where it started from, where it has continued to until this day, kind of the whole spectrum that it covers. So that is the topic. So that's why I said it's the primordial chain, at least the topic was given, right? So this is a stream of knowledge that stretches back to the beginning of time. So when we think, first of all, about knowledge, right? So we only have a Guru Parampara if there is something to be taught, right? A Parampara exists for a branch of knowledge. Way back before other civilizations had even opened their eyes, Bharatamata was well-versed and was very pioneering in terms of the way that she engineered her learning methods. So that's why our country itself is called Bharata. Bha is light. Rata is that which is engrossed in, or that which revels in light becomes Bharata. And that is why our acharyas are Bharati, right? So ever since that, even by Indology, even by the West's count, about 4,000, 5,000 years ago, Bharatamata was already very, very advanced, not just in physical sciences, but in sciences and in fields of knowledge that go beyond the physical. So more than just physics and chemistry, we had made great strides in philosophy, in logic, right? So we had several shastras. We had, for example, we had Ganita Shastra, right? We had maths, we had Jyotishya, which is astronomy. We had Rasayana Shastra, we had chemistry. But even once you reach a certain point, right? Once the physical sciences can support material prosperity, the mind turns to something more. We need something more than just physical material comfort. At that point, the mind and the jiva, the soul, we start to look for something greater in life, something beyond just an experience, right? We start to look for our reality, our place in this universe, our purpose in this fabric of space and time, right? So that gave rise to the darshanas. In Sanatana Dharma, they are called darshanas. So drishyate anena, it is well seen by these means. So those branches of knowledge which give us proper sight of who we are, how we exist in this world, are called darshanas. Those fields of knowledge are called darshanas. And there are 12 of these. 6 Nastika darshanas and 6 Astika darshanas. So Nastika darshanas are those which do not take Vedas pramana. So Charvakas, Jainas, and 4 schools of Buddhism. So 4 Bauddhas, so Sutrantikas, Yogacharas, Madhyamikas, like that. There are 4 schools of Buddhist thought, and there are on top of that, so 4 schools of Buddhist thought, then Charvakas and Jainas. So all total 6. Then, once we come to the Astika darshanas, these are the darshanas that we're more concerned about. These 2 are 6. So the first 2 we have Sankhya Yoga, then Nyaya Vaisheshika, then Purva and Uttara Mimamsa. So if we take kind of these in order, all of these darshanas, besides the last one, besides the 6th, so Sankhya Yoga, Nyaya Vaisheshika, Purva, Uttara Mimamsas. So besides Uttara Mimamsa, the others are all very much complementary. They are their own fields of thought, they are their own schools of thought, but they all interlock. So they form a web of knowledge, it's better to say. So if you look at what these darshanas do, their job is very simple. We know that there is a jiva, and we know that the jiva needs to get moksha. Why? These are astika darshanas, which means the common point is that they have the Vedas as pramana. So the job now is, the Veda says that there is a jiva, Veda says that the jiva needs to get moksha. So now the job that the darshanas need to do is present a method to get from bandha to moksha. So bandha, bandhakarana to moksha, and moksha karana vidhana. So this is the subject matter of these 6 darshanas. So Sankhya, the Sankhya school of thought was advanced by Kapila Maharshi. So Sankhya comes from the word Sankhya. Sankhya means count. So what the Sankhyas did was they divided this world into 24 different tattvas, Chaturvimshati tattvas. So Mahat, Prakriti, then the Pancha Karmendriyas, Pancha Jnanendriyas, Pancha Tanmatras, like that. They have a division, and then beyond all of this is Purusha. So Purusha is separate from Prakriti. They have a whole school of thought, and they delineated what they thought was the way the world works and the way to best get moksha. Then comes yoga. yoga was advanced by Patanjali Maharshi. So we have the very famous Yoga Sutras. So yoga is a method of practice. So Sankhya is more like a classification in terms of its being a school of thought. Sankhya Karikas by Kapila Maharshi show that. Yoga is more so a practical thing. It comes into practice, control of the mind. So yoga is a path that is 8-step. So it's called Ashtanga Yoga. Anga is a limb, but they're more like steps. So yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So you follow these 8 steps, step by step you go. And by the time you get to samadhi, that is the end goal of yoga. These days we start off doing just the asana part. But before asana too, the yama and niyama part need to be followed. So we can maybe talk about that another time. But for now, we're just trying to look at the stream of thought here. So after yoga came nyaya. Nyaya is neither a process nor a division, but it's a means of thought. Nyaya seeks to explain the world through logic. So Nyaya too, there is Puratana Nyaya and Navya Nyaya. So there are 2 fields here kind of. So Puratana Nyaya was advanced by Gautama Maharshi. So he wrote the Nyaya Sutras. And complementary to this is another darshana called the Vaisheshika Darshana, which was advanced by Karnada Maharshi. He brought in an aspect called Vishesha, from which the name Vaisheshika was derived. So these 2 were ancient. Then about, I think, around the 11th, 12th, or 13th century, a great Pandita called Gangeshopadhyaya, he was in Andhra, came along, and he kind of unified these 2 and brought it into what's called Navya Nyaya or Navina Tarka. So this is the Tarka Shastra that is studied most often these days. So Tarka Sangraha, Neelakanthiya, Muktavadi. So this whole sequence of Tarka Shastra is from Gangeshopadhyaya, which draws from the Nyaya Darshana of Gautama Maharshi and the Vaisheshika Siddhanta of Karnada Maharshi. After these 2 come Purva and Uttara Mimamsas. So Mimamsa, we need to understand what Mimamsa is. So Manana Ichha is Mimamsa. So the desire to do manana, to contemplate, to think about the true meaning of things, of the Vedas particularly. So Purva Mimamsa is also referred to as Karma Kanda. Uttara Mimamsa is also referred to as Jnana Kanda. So Purva Mimamsa basically says that karma is moksha sadhana. Karma is what will get you to moksha. So it extensively discusses like yajnas, yagas, how to do various rites, how to perform various karmas, where it comes from. But most importantly, Purva Mimamsa's greatest contribution to Sanatana Dharma is they say Mimamsa Shabdaha Pujita Vichara Artha Paraha. So Mimamsa is most used to discern the true meaning of a sentence. So Veda has several phrases, and these phrases are not out of human origin. Veda reveals itself. It is Apaurushaya, right? We've said that several times. So because Veda is not of human authorship, it sometimes becomes hard for us to understand exactly what it's saying, right? If a human writes something, it's very easy for us. We go to the author and say, please, sir, what did you mean when you said this? When knowledge is not coming from a single person, it becomes harder for us. It's not possible for us to ask the author what he or she meant, right? So what then happens is we know that Veda is right. So we need to figure out how to arrive at the correct understanding of Veda mantras. So there's a lot of debate here. So they say that Veda is not a pramana for 3 reasons. And then they show that there are 3 reasons why it is a pramana and why these previous reasons are not wrong. We don't have to get into all of that. But Mimamsa did a lot of work in discerning and pinpointing where the meaning of a sentence comes from. So Shabda Bodha it is called. So how do we understand sentences? How do we understand words? How do we understand phrases? How do we come at the tatparya, right? So it's one thing if we read a passage, it'll say several things, but how do we come to the tatparya? So to the final, what is this passage trying to say, right? What is its ultimate intent? Where does that ultimate intent lie at? So Mimamsa did a lot in that field. So in helping us understand how speech is to be interpreted. Then we come to what we most talk about these days, Uttara Mimamsa, also called Vedanta. So Vedanta is Vedanto Nama Upanishad Pramanam, Tad Upakaranani Sharirika Mimamsadi Sutranicha is the phrase from Vedanta Sara. So what is Vedanta? Vedanta is that school of knowledge that takes the Upanishads as the main source of knowledge as well as the Vedanta Sutras written by Badarayana Maharshi. So what Vedanta says is, with knowledge comes moksha. That's the main proposition that Vedanta puts forth, and Vedanta draws from all of the others. So it relies on the Nyaya of Nyaya and Vaisheshika. It takes the divisions given by the Sankhya. So the 24-fold division, it takes from Sankhya. From yoga, it accepts the yoga school as an appropriate means to control the body and mind. From Purva Mimamsa, it takes the way we arrive at understanding sentences, the way to properly interpret things. So the Vedanta Siddhanta, so the Vedanta Darshana draws from all the other Siddhantas and presents a comprehensive, thorough overview of the best way to get from Bandha to Moksha, which is why they say, Darshaneshu Darshaniyatamam Darshanam Vedanta Darshanam. The Vedanta Darshana is the most charming or the most pleasing to look at out of all these 6 darshanas. These 6 darshanas combined are called Shad Darshanas. So aside from these Shad Darshanas, we have the Chaturdasha Vidyas, which are very popular. So we have Angani Vedash Chatvaru, Mimamsa Nyaya Vistaraha, Dharmashastram Puranancha Vidya Hyeta Chaturdasha. So you've heard this before probably. So the 14 Vidyas, right? The Chaturdasha Vidyas that are very popular in Sanatana Dharma. So the Angani, so Veda, first the 4 Vedas, Rig, Yajus, Sama, Atharvangirasaha, or Atharvana Veda, these 4 Vedas. Then the 6 Vedangas, so Shiksha, Kalpa, Nyaya, Vyakarana, Mimamsa, Chandas. So Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Niruktan, Jyotishangati, Chandaha. So these 6 are the Vedangas. And then on top of that you have Mimamsa. And then on top of that you have Nyaya. And then Dharma Shastra and Purana. So these 14 are the Vidya Hyetash Chaturdasha. These are the 14 Vidyas. So like this, there are numerous schools of thought in our ancient Sanatana Dharma, but the one that we most revere, the one that we most adore is the Vedanta Darshana, because it is the way to get us to something that is beyond these 5 senses, right? It's because it takes the Upanishads and the Vedas as pramanam. Why? Because the Vedas give us alaukika jnana. So most other knowledges, like Tarka, for example, right? So Nyaya is logic. Logic does not necessarily need Veda. Nyaya Darshana is still derived from the Vedas, don't get me wrong there. But for example, Nyaya is not meant to tell us about something that is not perceptible, right? We rely on Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Upamana as well as Shabda, right? So most of Nyaya, for those of you that have read it, is actually concerned with Pratyaksha and Anumana. So Pratyaksha is direct sensory perception, Anumana is inference, Upamana is simile, and then comes Shabda, which is Aptavakya, which is Veda. So these are the ways that, the 4 things that, for example, Nyaya uses to learn as sources of knowledge. The first 3 of these do not rely on Atindriya Jnana. The first 3 of these do not rely on knowledge that is beyond the senses. The Upanishads merely deal with that subject matter, which is why we revere the Vedanta Sampradaya, the Vedanta Darshan as well as its Acharyas, because they give us a knowledge that would otherwise never be accessible to the naked human brain, to the unaided human brain. So the Vedanta Sampradaya is what we usually mean when we celebrate Guru Purnima. So the Vedanta gurus that have been there. So even then within Vedanta, there are several schools of thought. We have, of course, Advaita, Vishishtadvaita, and Dvaita. These are the main 3, advanced by Adi Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, and Madhvacharya, respectively. Aside from this, we have Dvaita-Dvaita, Vishuddha-Dvaita, Shiva-Dvaita, then we have Chaitanya Prabhu's Sampradaya. So there are several schools of thought, all which take the Upanishads as pramana, but arrive at different conclusions. So for example, the Vishishtadvaita Sampradaya takes the Upanishads as pramana, but comes to the idea that Jiva is a fraction of Ishvara, broadly speaking. Of course, there's, as usual with anything else in Sanatana Dharma, there's a whole world of complication in that. The Dvaita Sampradaya takes the Upanishads as pramana and comes to the conclusion that the Jiva is separate from Ishvara and is his servant. Then the Advaita school of thought takes the Upanishads as pramana and says that the purport, the final tatparya of these Upanishads is that there is a singular non-dual Brahman that is not different from the Jiva himself. So in this way, there are different sampradayas even within Vedanta itself. This is normal for everything, even in Purva Mimamsa. So in the karma portion, there are 2 schools. There are Prabhakaras and there are Bhattas. So Prabhakara's school of thought is one line of is one line in Purva Mimamsa, and Kumarila Bhatta school of thought is different. So like that in Vedanta Darshana too, we have several different lines, but we'll be talking about the Advaita Darshana today. So I said that this knowledge was primordial. This knowledge has started since the dawn of time and before time too, if we technically think about it, right? So the gamut of Vedanta is covered mainly by three texts called Prasthanatrayi. So the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and Bhagavad Gita, right? So these three are the main texts that all sub-schools of Vedanta draw from to come to their conclusions. So Upanishads, we've already talked about the philosophical portions of the Vedas. Then we have Brahma Sutras. So sutras are aphorisms, right? So Alpaksharam Asandigdham. They're short phrases that contain packages of knowledge written by Badarayana Maharshi. So in about 555 sutras in 4 adhyayas, each adhyaya having 4 padas, he has written the Brahma Sutras. So what these Brahma Sutras do is, the Upanishads, as I said, they're from the Vedas. So they don't always make sense at first sight. So what the Brahma Sutras did was, they gave us the nyayas, they gave us the maxims and the methods necessary to do the samanvaya, to reconcile those Vedavakyas into an understandable fashion. And then we have Bhagavad Gita, told obviously by Bhagavan himself, which was in the Mahabharata. It's called the Smriti Prasthana. In it, it's basically the Sara, the Sangraha of everything taught in the Upanishads. So based on these three, Adi Shankaracharya proved via his bhashyas that the Tatparya, the final purport of these texts, exists in an Advaya Brahman, in a Brahman without second, that is one with the Jiva. So when we think about this parampara, the shloka goes, so this is called the Brahma Sutra parampara, at least. So the shlokam goes, we know the Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam, that's a famous shloka. But the proper one that is done before Patha of Brahma Sutra is Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vashishtham Shaktincha Tatputra Parasharancha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindram Athasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharyam Athasya Padmapadancha Hastamalakancha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaram Anyanasmad Gurun Santata Manatosmi. Goes the 2 shlokas. So this covers the entire parampara starting from Bhagavan up to our acharyas today. So I was thinking, because we are celebrating this Vedanta Sampradaya Guru Parampara, we could do namaskaram to each of these gurus in succession and talk about what it is that they gave us as Jnana Bhiksha, as Jnana Prasada. So this stream of knowledge starts from Narayana. So already we have a question. Well, the shlokam we say Sadashiva Samarambham. So why is this starting from Narayana? Let's start with what Veda says first. Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam Yo Vedanscha Prahinoti Tasmai Tagam Devam Atmabuddhi Prasadam Mumukshurvai Sharanamaham Prapadya is what Veda says. So there was that Bhagavan in the time before time. Yo Brahmanam Vidadhati Purvam. From him came Chaturmukha Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, the first Jiva, the Prathama Jiva. So Brahma was created from that primordial Brahman. And to that Brahma, Yo Vedamshta Prahinoti Tasmai. So he gave the Vedas to Brahma as Prasada. So to that Deva, I do Mumukshurvai Sharanamaham Prapadye. Mumukshuhu, being someone who is in search of moksha, I do Sharanagati to that Bhagavan. So because we said that Bhagavan, so Paramatma, Parabrahman, is the one that created Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma, and gave the Vedas to him. That Parabrahma is the start of this line of thought, of this philosophical Vedantic line of thought. Now, if you consider that Brahman to be in the form of Vishnu, you say Narayana. If you consider that Brahman to be in the form of Shiva as Dakshinamurti, you say Sadashiva. Either way, there is no problem that we have with each name. Even if we look at the names Narayana, so Nara Eva Ayana, right? So Nara, we say, so Narova Apaha Tadeva Ayanam. So he whose residence is in water is Narayana, so Vishnu, because he exists in Samudra. But if we look at it in the Nirguna sense, right, in the Advaitic sense, Nara is knowledge, right? That's why Narada Maharshi is called that, right? Because Naram Dadati, he gives knowledge, so he's Narada. In the same way, Nara Ayana. So one whose residence exists in knowledge is Narayana. So there you have it, is Nirguna Brahma, who is Jnana Swarupa. Same with Sadashiva. So Shiva does not refer to just the three-eyed God who is the husband of Parvati and has Nandi as his Vahana, but if you look at actually the definition of Shiva in Vishnu Sahasranama, or even if you look at it in other shlokas, it's very, it's talking about a Brahman that is beyond the three qualities. So the shloka actually goes, Yasyechayeva bhuvanani samudbhavanti, tishthanti yanticha layam punar yugante, tasmai samastha phalabhoga nibandhanaya, nitya prabuddha muditaya namah shivaya. So this shloka is a definition of what it means to be Shiva. Sadashiva means one who is eternal in Shiva, or eternally Shiva. So he by whose will these worlds come into existence, are preserved, tishthanti yanti chalayam, tishthanti yanti vilayam cha punar yugante. So in the end of time, they again dissolve back into him. So to that Bhagavan who is Samasthah phalabhoga nibandhana. So he by whose order the karma phala is dispensed, and he who in his swarupa, in his true nature is Nitya Prabuddha Mudita. Nitya is Sat, Prabuddha is Chit, Mudita is Ananda. So one whose core form is Sat Chit Ananda, to him Namah Shivaya. So Namaskaram to Shiva whose form is of this nature. So again we see that Shiva is not just a three-eyed God, but it's Parabrahma himself, right? So at the end of the day, all knowledge starts from him. So if we take, for example, let's take Bhagavan to be Paramashiva, to be Sadashiva. So as Dakshinamurti, he is the first guru, right? So he teaches with Mauna Vyakhya. We get a question here. How can something be taught with silence, right? So usually any mode of teaching needs some speaking somewhere or the other. Dakshinamurti does not do that. He just has the Chinmudra and the Pustaka in his hand. But Chinmudra is Yo Mudraya Bhadraya, right? So Bhajatam, yes, Swatmaram Prakatiye Karoti Bhajatam Yo Mudraya Bhadraya. So to those who seek refuge in him, he reveals himself to them with this one Chinmudra. And he is silent, he does not speak. How does Dakshinamurti teach with silence? The answer is very simple. He is teaching something that cannot be expressed with words, therefore he's teaching with silence, right? The students that are sitting in front of him are whom? Varshishtante Vasadrishiganaihi. So they're Varshishthas. Varsha is a year. Varshiyan is one who is very old. Varshishtha means one who is unimaginably old. So these Ante Vasat Rishiganaha, so these students who are serving him are Varshishtaha, they're very old. And who are these people? Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara, these people are all jnanis in their own right. They have known everything that can be known that is expressible with words. So now that they have known everything that can be expressed with words, now Bhagavan is teaching them Atma Jnana, which is beyond words. Therefore, he does not use words to teach. He teaches with Mauna Jnana, with Mauna Vyakhya. So this Chinmudra is very simple. The world is made up of triads, right? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Bhuta, Vartamana, Bhavishyat, right? So these three qualities, 3 time periods. This is the Jiva. This finger is Ishvara. So the Jiva's natural state is to exist, or without any other intervention. The Jiva exists in this world of triads. The process of bringing the Jiva away from these and uniting him with Ishvara is the nature of Chinmudra. When you unite, it forms a whole, right? It forms a full circle and these 2 fingers become one. So the Jiva becomes one with Ishvara and becomes Purna. So that is the essence of Chinmudra. You take the Jiva away from the 3 gunas and the 3 kalas and the 3 dehas and the 3 avasthas. So all these 3s that exist in this world that the Jiva ties his identity to, he breaks away from those and unites with Paramatma. His nature, he understands that his true Swabhava is one with Paramatma. So he teaches with the Chinmudra. Another form of Shiva that we can take to be the Adi Guru is, or not Adi Guru, but Guru is Nataraja Swami. Why? Because all teaching, aside from the silent teaching that he does, so the teacher of that which is taught with silence is Dakshinamurti. The teacher of everything that is taught with words is Nataraja. Why? Because where did all these words come from? From letters. Where did these letters come from? These letters are Nataraja's prasada to Panini Maharshi. So Panini Maharshi was doing tapas one day. So Patanjali Maharshi describes it very beautifully in Mahabharshi. So he's Prangmukha Maharshi. So apparently Darbhasinaha. So Panini Maharshi was facing east, with sitting on his asana of Darbhas with Darbhas in his hand, closing his eyes, and he was doing meditation of Paramatma. So Paramatma gave him darshana as Shiva doing Tandava, doing his Sandhya Tandava. So Nrittavasane Nataraja Rajaha Nanada Dhakkam Navapanchavaram Uddhartukamat Sanakadi Siddhan. Right? So Shiva gave him darshana dancing and he hit his damaru 14 times. So those 14 sounds became Ayun, Lurik, Ayong, Ayoch, Hayavarat, Lan. So like that, it made 14 sounds that encompass all the letters of the Sanskrit language, both vowels and consonants. So the first Ayun, Lurik, Ayong, Ayoch. So the first 4 sutras. So the first 4 sounds talk about the vowels. The other 10 talk about the consonants. So Bhagavan Paramashiva is the one that gave us all these letters. And from these letters, in this order, the order 2 is very important, Panini Maharshi constructed Vyakarana. So he constructed grammar. Why do we need grammar? That's another question, right? So Raksha Hogama Lagha Sandehaf Prayojanam is what Patanjali says in Mahabhashya. Raksha Uha Agama Laghu Asandehaf Prayojanam. So Raksha, to protect the Vedas, meaning Uha. So this is more Mimamsa thing. So when you need to use one yaga as a blueprint for the other, you need to know how to change one word. For example, if you say Agnaya Swaha here, right? And you need to say Indra, in the Devata and the other yaga is Indra. So Agnaye is the Chaturthi Vibhakti. So you know that Agni becomes Agnaye. So if you know Vyakarana, you can then know that here it is Indra, so it becomes Indraya Swaha. So that is Uha. Like this, Patanjali Maharshi lists out the different necessities of Vyakarana, but the main 2 that we use in day-to-day is Laghu and Asandeha. So Asandeha means it makes meanings very clear, right? So if I say, I need to talk to my friend about the test, right? So this about to, all of these are grammatical concepts, right? If I just say, I friend test, right? Are you going to test your friend, right? Does your friend have a test that he needs to ask you about, right? Is the test asking you about your friend, right? What does the sentence mean? Without grammar, everything becomes a sandeha. There is a doubt. So what grammar does for us is it gives us a clarity in expression. Another thing it does is laghu. This is more a Sanskrit thing, maybe not so much in English, but in Sanskrit, there are certain things that allow us to shorten the way things are done. Maybe it does exist in English too. For example, you have the dhatu, the verb root kr, which means to do, right? Karoti is someone is doing, it's a verb, right? So rather than saying the doer of, right? If you say the doer of, that's 3 words, right? You just use Vyakarana, you put on this pratyaya called trich, chukr, and then you make this word called karta, which means doer, right? So by the process of Vyakarana, you have taken away 3 words and replaced it with 1 word that conveys the same meaning, right? Another example is we call Rama Dasharathi, right? So rather than saying Dasharathasya Patyam Puman, which is 3 words, right? Dasharatha's male child. Rather than saying these 3 words, you just use the word Dasharathi, right? So in the space of 1 word, you have conveyed the meaning that it took 3 words to convey. So Vyakarana's, another help that Vyakarana gives for us is it allows us to abbreviate things and convey them in as few words as possible, right? Time is of the essence, right? That's what we say. So the quicker we can express things and the fewer words we can express things in, the more concise and compact and crisp we can be with delivery. So this whole Vyakarana that is so, integral to daily life and to learning was given by the sutras, was given by Panini Maharshi, only because he got the sutras from Parameshvara, from Nataraja. So for all this speech, so anything that is taught by speech, this all is Parameshvara's prasada. So in that way, Sadashiva is the guru, both for that which is said and that which is not said. So uktancha anuktancha, right? They say in Veda. So everything that we vocalize and everything that we cannot vocalize, Ishvara is the teacher for that. So Ishana Sarva Vidyanam, right? He is the master of all Vidyas, right? So that's if we take it to be Shiva. Narayana too is the Adi Guru, right? As Bhagavan, as Krishna, as Narasimha, right? These are all Jnana Swarupas. But if we're taking him to be the primordial Guru, Hayagriva, right? So when Narayana was sleeping, from his navel came Brahma. This is told in Mahabharata, actually. The story, Hayagriva Avirbhava, is told in Mahabharata. So when Brahma came, Brahma was coming, Narayana was still in Yoga Nidra. So Brahma is sitting there, he doesn't know what to do. And then he got the word tapa. He heard the word tapa, he did tapas, he got the Vedas, and he started doing his job with the Vedas. Then from Narayana's ear come these two Rakshasas called Madhu and Kaitabha. These are Rajas and Tamogunas respectively. So what they did was, Brahma got arrogant. He said, I am the creator of everything. I have the Vedas in my hand. So these two Rakshasas, they go and steal the Vedas from Brahma, right? So then Brahma realizes, oh, I got arrogant. I need to meditate upon whoever my creator is. So then Narayana manifests as Hayagriva with the horse head, and he lets out a neigh, right? A hesha, it is called. So Vedanta Deshika describes that hesha very beautifully. So he says it's Samahara Samnam, Pratipadam Richam, Dhama Irusham. So it is the summary of Rigveda, summary of Yajurveda, summary of Samaveda, right? Of summary of Rig mantras, summary of Yajur mantras, and summary of Sama mantras. So with that one hesha of Hayagriva Swami, the Madhukaitabhas ran away. And then the Vedas were stolen, right? So from his own hesha, Bhagavan recreates the Vedas and teaches them back to Brahma. So in that way, Narayana too is the Adi Guru, the first teacher, right? So whether we take it to be Sadashiva or Narayana, there is no doubt there, right? So the shloka goes, Maheshwareva Jagatamadhishware Janardaneva Jagadantaratmani na Vastubheda Pratipatti Rastime. So whether it is in Maheshwara, Shiva, who is the master of the worlds, or in Janardana, who is the Antaryami of these three worlds, there is no difference between the two, right? If we're fighting about whether Shiva is different from Vishnu or not, then we have bigger problems than who said what in Advaita, right? So first, let's accept the maxim that it is Paramatma who is the first guru. Whether it's Shiva or Vishnu is immaterial. In the Brahma Sutra Sampradaya Shloka, though, they start with Narayana, so that's generally what is told. Then from Narayana, Brahma, right? So I already said, so Brahma was taught, right? From Vishnu, he taught him the Vedas, so Brahma is the next guru. So from Brahma, from Narayana and Brahma, this section of the Guru Parampara is called the Daivi Parampara, right? Narayana and Brahma are deities, they're gods. So this section is called the Daivi Parampara. Next comes the Arsha Parampara or the Rishi Parampara. So the next section of gurus is, they're all rishis. So Narayana, so Padmabhuva is Brahma. His son is Vashishta Maharshi. So Vashishta Maharshi, of course, is the Jnani of the highest class. Who else can teach Paramatma as Ramachandra, right? He taught all of the great kings of Raghuvamsha, right? And he gave us a beautiful text called Yoga Vashishta. So once at night, after Rama had finished studying all the other vidyas, he got a doubt at night. Who am I, right? What is my true nature? So the story goes, he goes to Vashishta Maharshi's door at the dead of night. Think about it. The crown prince of an entire kingdom goes to his teacher in the middle of the night and knocks on the door because he wants to know who he is. So he knocks on the door. Vashishta Maharshi from inside says, Kastvam, who is it? Who is knocking? And then Ramachandra says, that's the question I have come to be answered. That's what I want answered from you. So then Vashishta Maharshi opens the door, sits Ramachandra down, and teaches him this beautiful text called Yoga Vashishta. So that's the summary. It covers everything that you need to know in Vedanta. The Prameya, everything about the Prameya is told there. There's no Vadopavad, so there's no like back and forths, what is right, how is this meaning correct, none of that. It just says what is there to be known. So Yoga Vashishta is a very great comprehensive text. It's in relatively easy Sanskrit too. So maybe we can talk about that in another session someday. So from Vashishta, his son Shakti. So Shakti Maharshi, so the knowledge was passed from Vashishta Maharshi to Shakti Maharshi. Then from Shakti Maharshi to Parashara Maharshi. So Parashara Maharshi is actually mostly known for his smritis. So they say Kalo Parashari Smriti, right? So smritis are a special class of texts. So Veda is called Shruti, right? You hear it. Shrotavyam Shruti Vakyebhya. So Vedas are passed down through an auditory thing, right? Through an auditory parampara. So because they remember what the Vedas said and keep the Vedas teachings in mind and simplify it for us, these certain texts are called smritis, also called Dharma Shastra. So Manusmriti, right? Yajnavalkya Smriti, Parashara Smriti, Gautama Smriti. We have all of these different Smriti Granthas that teaches Dharma. So Parashara Smriti is very well known. That's Parashara Maharshi's most well-known work. But he was also part of this parampara of Vedanta Jnana. So then, Parashara Maharshi was, incidentally, the father of Vyasa Maharshi. So this is actually, until now, it's a father-son tradition, right? So Narayana's son is Brahma. Brahma's son is Vashishta. Vashishta's son is Shakti. Shakti's son is Parashara. Parashara's son is Vyasa Maharshi. So here, once we come to Vyasa Maharshi, we have reached a great Kalpavriksha of Sanatana Dharma. So actually this Purnima is also called Vyasa Purnima because this Ashadha Purnima is when Vyasa Maharshi was born. The Vyasa Maharshi is probably the single greatest contributor to Sanatana Dharma's literature. If we think about everything he's done, first of all, he divided the Vedas. So that's why he's called Vyasa, Veda Vyasa, right? Then he wrote Mahabharata, he wrote the Brahma Sutras, he wrote the 18 Puranas, among which Bhagavata is one of them, right? So Vyasa Maharshi has done so much. He has given us so much literature, right? First thing he did was Veda Vyasa. Vyasa means Vyasa, to separate, to sort, right? So Veda refers to a mass of mantras. So a mantra is maybe 2 lines, 3 lines, like Ashtapadi, Navapadeva Bhuvushi, right? Gauri Mimaya, Tarila Nita Kshatyekapati, Dvipadi, Sa Chatushpadi, Ashtapadi, Navapadeva Bhuvushi, Sahasra Akshara Parame Vyoman, says the Veda, right? So mantras can be made up of 1 line, 2 lines, 4 lines, right? There are different chandases based on that. There are different mantras, right? So this mass of all these mantras, this big congealed mass, is called Veda. There are 3 types of mantras. So there are certain Rig mantras. There are certain types of mantras called Yajur mantras. There are certain types of mantras called Sama mantras. So these 3 types of mantras exist kind of all mixed together. So you can think of it like if you have a Lego set, right? There are yellow Lego blocks, there are blue Lego blocks, and there are red Lego blocks, right? And they're all mixed together in the box. So what Vyasa Maharshi did was he separated them. So he sorted these things into 4 sections. So he made Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharvana Veda. So he took this mass of Rig, Yajur, Sama mantras and made them into 4 Vedas. And these 4 Vedas then were separated into 1,131 shakhas. So Yajur Veda, Rig Veda has about like over 100 shakhas. Yajur Veda, or I forget, 13 shakhas maybe. And then Yajur Veda has like 100 shakhas. Samaveda has over 1,000 shakhas, like that. There's numbers for everything given in Mahabhashya, and certain Shiksha Shastras mention it too. But these Vedas are then split into shakhas and everyone learns their own shakha. But this division of Vedas by which people can then study their own Veda. For one person to study in the entire mass of Veda with the lifespan in Kali Yuga is something that will not happen. So by dividing the Vedas and then by making them into shakhas, Vyasa Maharshi ensured that we all could study the Veda. Those of us who have had Upanayana can learn to chant the Veda. The knowledge of the Veda, of course, is open to everyone. Everyone can learn and benefit from their Shakha's Veda, right? So by dividing the Vedas, Vyasa Maharshi made it much easier for us to study it overall comprehensively. Then he made the Brahma Sutras. So as we said, we have Vedanta, right? So the ends of the Vedas, literally Vedanam Antaha Paramatatparya Vishayi Bhutaha. So what do the Vedas intend to convey to us overall? What's the end goal, right? What's the end game? So that is Vedanta. So to better explain the Upanishads, which are Vedanta, Vyasa Maharshi wrote, or Badarayana, his another name is Badarayana because his ashrama is in Badari, in the Badari Kshetra in the Himalayas. He wrote the Brahma Sutras, which I talked about earlier. It's a very high class, very scholarly text. Not everyone gets the chance to learn or understand it. So he went one step farther. So he took this knowledge, this dharma and jnana, and he put it into stories of the Puranas. So the 18 Puranas. So Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Vamana, Bhavishyotara, all these different Puranas, right? Narada Purana, Linga Purana, Kanda Purana, Padma Purana, all of these different Puranas. Right? We have 18 main Puranas and several Upa Puranas like Nrasimha Purana, Narada Purana, Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, right? There are different Puranas, Upa Puranas, 18 main Puranas. So Vyasa Maharshi wrote those 2. Then he also wrote Mahabharata, which is called Panchama Veda, right? It is like a Veda in its own right because Mahatvat Bharavatvatcha, because it is big and it is hefty. That's literally what the name Mahabharata means. A big and hefty book, right? If you've ever seen those big physics textbooks, they're like this big, right? Mahabharata is literally the most voluminous book in all of recorded human literature. It's bigger than the Odyssey, it's bigger than the Iliad, it's bigger than those 2 combined several times over. Mahabharata is a massive text about 1,00,000 shlokas, lakshadhika shlokas in Mahabharata. And in that Mahabharata, Madhya Mahabharatam, we get Bhagavad Gita, we get Vishnu Sahasranama, we get Sanat Sujatiya, right? So we get Viduraniti, we get all of these, mines of knowledge, Shiva Sahasranama from this Mahabharata. So and Bhagavata Purana, all the Puranas are in one league. Bhagavata Purana is in a league of its own because it is a Purana that was written purely for moksha. All the other Puranas Vyasa Maharshi wrote, but he still wasn't satisfied. Then Narada Maharshi came and said, talk about Paramatma in such a way that it will enable people to come to get moksha. So Bhagavata Purana was written specifically for us to get jnana and thereby moksha. So all of this corpus of literature was given to us by Vyasa Maharshi. So that is why on Vyasa Purnima, we make sure that we have to do namaskaram to Vyasa Maharshi. And this is another thing that we need to keep in mind. Why do we celebrate general Guru Purnima and Vyasa Purnima, right? We can do Guru Purnima on Shankaracharya's birthday. We can do Guru Purnima on Krishnashtami. We can do Guru Purnima, on some other great teacher's birthday, right? Why do we do it on Vyasa Maharshi's birthday? It's because anything that any teacher after this teaches is always based on what Vyasa Maharshi said, whether it's based on the Puranas that Vyasa Maharshi wrote, or the Vedas that Vyasa Maharshi divided, or the Brahma Sutras that Vyasa Maharshi wrote, or the Puranas that he gave us, right? All of this, no matter who teaches or what they teach, it has to come from this set of literature. So we celebrate Guru Purnima on Vyasa Purnima, or other way, Vyasa Purnima as Guru Purnima, because anything that any guru teaches is Vyasochistam, right? The saying is Vyasochistam Jagat Sarvam. This entire and any knowledge that exists that a teacher can teach us must have come from Vyasa Maharshi. So we celebrate Guru Purnima on Vyasa Purnima. From Vyasa Maharshi is Shuka Maharshi, right? So the actual teacher of Bhagavata. So the person that Vyasa Maharshi wrote as teaching Bhagavata. Shuka Maharshi is a jnani of the highest order. So he doesn't even wear clothes, right? So his dhyana shloka goes, Yam pravrajanta manupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatala ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo pinedu tam sarvabhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. So the story goes, comes in the beginning of Bhagavata. So Shuka Maharshi, he did not even wear clothes, right? He was so realized that he was not even aware of the body. So he was just walking, and there were girls taking a bath in the river next to him. They did not, cover themselves up or feel ashamed because they know that Shuka Maharshi is in a different level. He won't even look this way. So they were normal. Then Vyasa Maharshi is running behind Shuka Maharshi, calling him. Shuka Maharshi does not hear him because he is engrossed in Brahmanubhava and experiencing Brahman. When Vyasa Maharshi goes by, he's calling out Shuka in the hope that Shuka Maharshi will hear him. Shuka Maharshi did not hear him because he was engrossed in Brahman. But what happened, because Shuka's Atma was one with the entire world, right? Shuka was experiencing that he was one with Brahman who exists in every atom of this world. So though Shuka Maharshi did not respond, the trees responded, it seems. So when Vyasa called out Putra, the trees echoed back a response. So what the poet there says is, because Shuka Maharshi was one with the Brahman that is in everything, though he did not answer, because they were also one with him at that time, the trees gave back a response. So namaskaram to that Maharshi who is one with the Sarvabhuta Hridaya, with the Atma of every being in this world, right? So that's why we refer to him not just as Shuka Maharshi, but as Shuka Brahma, right? So he is like Brahman in his own right. So Vyasam Shukam, then Gauda Padam. So then Gauda Bhagavat Padacharya. So Gauda Bhagavat Padacharya is another great yogi, great Acharya Sannyasi. He is most well known for the Gaudapada Karikas that he wrote for Mandukya. So Mandukya is an Upanishad. He wrote Karikas. So Karikas are certain short statements that summarize certain concepts that need to be kept in mind while reading that. So actually the Advaitam Paramarthataha, which is actually Sringeri Matha's their Granthavali, so their list of publications, the motto is Advaitam Paramarthataha. So that is actually a quote from Gauda Bhagavatpada's Mandukya Karikas. So Mandukya is a very short Upanishad, but it's a very powerful one. It talks about the avasthas and the turiya. So that's where we get the famous mantra Chaturtham Prapanchopashamam Shantam Shivam Advaitam. So the word Advaita is obviously used to refer to Brahman, saying that Brahman is Advaita. So it's a very important Upanishad in showing that the Tatparya exists in Advaya Brahma, in Advaita. So he wrote Karikas to that, helping us better understand it, right? So Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam, then Govinda Yogindram. So Govinda Bhagavatpadacharya was his student. So was Gauda Bhagavatpadacharya's student. Then Govinda Bhagavatpada was the teacher of Shankaracharya. So Shankaracharya, there is only so much that can be said about him. If it wasn't for him, Sanatana Dharma would not exist the way it did today. So when Bauddha was prevalent in India, as well as pure karma marga, so people who said that doing karma was the highest goal of life and swarga was the highest goal that humans had to achieve, Acharya came that no, there is a moksha sthiti that is beyond this. There is a moksha that is beyond just bhogas that are experienceable in this world or the next. There is jnana, only through jnana that is attainable. Here's how you attain jnana. And as we talked about in Shankara Jayanti, Acharya was so compassionate that he wrote things for everyone. For the lowest form of adhikaris who cannot process like philosophical, logical concepts, he wrote stotras. For those aspiring who are in the route, who are en route to understanding that, he wrote the Prakarana Grantha part of literature. So things like Tattvabodha, Atmabodha, Shatashloki, Ekashloki even, right? And then on top of that, he wrote Prasthanatrayi Bhashya, so commentaries for Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras, and Upanishads. So there's a lot to say about him. One of the greatest things he did was establish the 4 Pithas, right? So Jyotish Pitha, Govardhana Pitha in Sringeri, Badari, Dwaraka, and Puri. So Dwaraka, Badari, Puri, Dwaraka, Puri, Badari, Sringeri. So the 4 corners of India, he put up the 4 mathas to ensure that Sanatana Dharma was preserved, and thus he ensured that the Guru Parampara would continue. So in these 4 mathas, he put his next 4 shishyas. So Shri Shankaracharyam Athasya Padmapadancha Hastamalakancha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaram. So these 4 are his main shishyas. So these 4, let's look at them one by one. So Padmapada. Padmapada is a great disciple, a great Narasimhopasaka that was head of Dwaraka Matha, the first Acharya of Dwaraka Matha. So he had such great faith in his guru that one day his name before sannyasa was Sananda. Actually, his name was Sananda when he first became a student of Adi Shankaracharya. One day he was on the other side of Ganga and Shankaracharya called out. He says, Sananda, where are you? And Sananda heard him, and without even thinking that there was an entire river between him and his guru, he just started walking across. And pleased with his Guru Bhakti, Ganga Devi made a lotus come up every place he took a step so that he didn't fall into the river, and so he crossed. So because Padma sprouted up underneath his padas, he was called Padmapadacharya. He and Sureshwaracharya fall under what is called the Vivarana Prasthana. So even within Advaita, there are 2 modes of viewing it, and there's the Bhamati Prasthana and the Vivarana Prasthana. So Padmapadacharya and Sureshwaracharya subscribe to the Vivarana Prasthana, which is put forth in Padmapadacharya's Panchapadika. So this is a subtext for Acharya's Brahmasutra Bhashya. So only Padmapada wrote that for the entire Brahmasutra Bhashya, but because his work is only available for the first 5 padas, it is called Panchapadika. So he says, he takes up Pratibimbavada in it. That's a whole different thing, but that's Padmapadacharya's contribution. So the Panchapadika, and being Adi Shankaracharya's student and the first head of Dwaraka Pitha. Then we have Padmapadancha Hastamalaka. So Hastamalakacharya is another very great Acharya. So he was mute. He did not speak actually. So his parents were worried and they brought him to Shankaracharya and said, here's our son. He is not speaking. He looks like he is very dumb and mute, and he doesn't understand anything. So please take him. So then Shankaracharya asks the boy, who are you? So then this boy tells a series of beautiful shlokas ending with Sanityopalabdhis Swarupoham Atma. So I am that Atma who is ever present, always present. And this text is called Hasta Malakiya. It's a beautiful text. It's a very interesting text because usually the student writes a commentary on what the teacher has, on the teacher's composition, right? So Shankaracharya writes a text, Sureshwaracharya comments on him, or Padmapadacharya comments on it, right? In this case, however, these shlokas are called Hasta Malakiya, and the Guru, so Shankaracharya commentated on these shlokas. So Hasta Malaka, he was named like that because after the boy said this, Shankaracharya said, an Amalaka is a gooseberry. So because he sees the tattva as clearly as you can see an Amalaka placed in the palm of your hand. So if you actually look at a gooseberry in the full light, when it is ripe and when the sun is shining, the sun will shine through and the thing is translucent. The fruit is translucent, so you can see like every, I don't think they're called veins, but you can see every line within the berry. So just as that is very evident when it's in your hand, this boy sees the nature of Atma and sees the nature of Vedanta, of Parabrahma very clearly. So he was called Hasta Malaka. Then Totakacharya. So the Totaka story is also, Totakacharya story is also very famous. He was called Giri in his Purvashrama. He too was not the brightest of students. He used to do Guru Seva, like washing Acharya's clothes, washing his feet, making sure his food was ready. So he did a lot of Guru Seva, right? This is also an acceptable way to learn, right? So they say that there are several different ways to learn. Guru Shushrushaya Vidya, Pushkalena Dhanena va, Athva Vidyaya Vidya. So you can either get knowledge through serving the Guru, or by, paying your dues, your fees, or by teaching something and learning something in response, right? So these are the acceptable mediums of exchange for Vidya. So he was that kind of a student. He would do nothing more than serve his Guru. One day, so Shankaracharya did not start class because Giri had not yet showed up. The other students looked at one another. He doesn't even learn anyway. He doesn't understand what is being taught. Why is Acharya waiting for him? So Shankaracharya noticed this, and by his grace, he transferred his knowledge to that Giri. So when he came, he burst. So when Giri came to the spot, he burst into verse in this meter in Sanskrita that is called Totaka. So like Vidita, Khila Shastra, Sudha, Jaladhe. So a string of saganas is what it's called in Chandas Shastra. So sa, 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 sa. So Vidita, Salagam, 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 right? Like that. So this Totaka is not a very easy meter to compose in, but he composed in that on the spot. Now people these days are in the misapprehension that he got that name for writing the Totaka Ashtaka. So for the Ashtaka that was written in praise of Shankaracharya. So the Vidita Khila Shastra Sudha Jaladhe Mahitopanishat Kathidartanidhe Hridaye Kalaye Vimalam Charanam Bhavishankara Deshika Me Sharanam. So he did write this at that point, but that was not the shlokas he told extempore that he got the name Totaka for. So there is actually another set of shlokas in the same meter that he explains all of Shankaracharya's teachings in. So he summarizes Advaita Jnana in those teachings in the Totaka meter. So because of that knowledge he had gotten from his guru, he was given the name Totakacharya. In that sequence, he also then praised Shankaracharya, his guru, in that Totaka Vritta. So that is Totakacharya's story. So we have covered so far Padmapada, Hasta Malaka, and Totakacharya. The fourth, this shloka refers to as Vartikakara. Vartikakara is Sureshwaracharya. And it's important that we think of him because next he leads into the rest of the Guru Parampara that we can most obviously see these days. So Vartikakara, so this Sureshwaracharya in his Purvashrama was Mandana Mishra. So Mandana Mishra was a Purva Mimamsa Anuyayi. So he previously subscribed to the Purva Mimamsa school of thought. So the one that said that karma will give you Swarga, and that's that. He was a student of Kumarila Bhatta, who is a very great Mimamsaka. Like they call him Bhatta Pada. This suffix Pada is not usually applied to someone in Shastra unless they are an exceedingly great soul. So we call Shankaracharya Bhagavat Pada, right? So that Pada suffix is only used for those whom we hold at the highest of the high esteems. So like that, Kumarila Bhatta is referred to as Bhatta Pada. So his student was Mandana Mishra. So Shankaracharya defeated him in Vada and in debate and took him and brought him over to the Uttar Mimamsa, to the Vedanta school of thought, gave him the Yoga Patta, the sannyasi name, Sureshwara, and made him the first head of Sringeri Matha. So Sureshwara is called Vartikakara because he wrote Vartikas to Shankaracharya's Bhashya. So he wrote Taitriya Vartikas most famously. So Taitriya Vartikas on Adi Shankaracharya's Bhashya on the Taitriya Upanishad. And then he also wrote several independent works like Naishkarmya Siddhi. Naishkarmya Siddhi is a very voluminous, very great text that was written by him, again explaining certain Advaitic concepts. So from him comes the Sringeri Guru Parampara. So he was the first Acharya of Sringeri Matha. From him, the entire Parampara up to the 36th Acharya today, Shri Bharati Tirtha Swami Mahasannidhanam, and the 37th Acharya, Shri Vidhushekara Bharati Mahasannidhanam. So Tam Totakam Vartikakaram, and then Anyan. So from here, the line goes, from here the line changes to depending on whoever the teachers were. So Asmat Gurun, then up to our teachers, right? So in this same Shankara Sampradaya, to this day we have the 4 Chaturamnaya Pithas, and as well as Kanchi Matha, where the in Telugu they call him Nadiche Devudu, right? The walking God, the God that walks on earth among men, the great sage of Kanchi Matha that lived for a full 100 years, as ordained by Vedas, and to this day shines as the highest example of Sannyasa Dharma. So Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swami. So in Kanchi Matha, all the acharyas, and the suffix used there is Indra Saraswati. So for example, current acharyas, Shri Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swami, right? So that acharya, so Paramacharya, everyone calls him Paramacharya. He is Paramacharya to everyone, regardless of when they were born or where they fall. Everyone calls him Paramacharya, the greatest acharya, right? So he followed Sanatana Dharma to the T and Sannyasa Dharma to the T. He never once got in a vehicle. Why? Because he did not get in a bullock cart or a car. Why? Because he did not want to cause harm to any of the organisms in the path. He followed Sannyasa Dharma to that great an extent. Great sannyasi, they're a great acharya. Words cannot describe how great these acharyas are. So in Sringeri, the parampara, we have Shri Satchidananda Shiva Abhinava Nrsimha Bharati Swami. He was basically a Shankara after Shankaracharya himself. So he was the one who discerned that Kaladi was where Shankaracharya was born. He set several initiatives in place. Even before him, we have Vidyaranya Mahaswami, right? So he is again another equal to Shankaracharya. He wrote several texts, Drigdrashya Viveka. Panchadashi is a key Advaitic text that summarizes things very beautifully. He wrote bhashyas for the Vedas. So Veda Bhashya is very hard to do because you have to have mastered all the Vedangas to properly write a Bhashya for the Veda. So he wrote Veda Bhashyas as Shayana before as Madhava. So before his names were Shayana or Madhava. So Madhaviya Shankara Digvijaya. So he wrote another kavya called Shankara Digvijaya that details the life of Shankaracharya. So Vidyaranya Swami is another great soul in that line. Every one of them, all of them are stalwarts. All of them are Shankaracharya himself. So Shankaracharya wrote this text called Mathanushasana or Amnaya Shasana, in which he actually lays out what the guidelines to these pithas are. So who should be appointed as a pithadipati, what their duties are, which regions of India each of these pithas needs to look after. All of this is detailed. So he wrote in that each acharya that comes in these paramparas is my own farm. So from Sureshwaracharya back then to Bharati Tirtha Mahaswami and Vidhushekara Bharati Mahaswami to this day, every one of them is Shankaracharya himself, verily. That's why in their Birudavani to this day, we call them Jagadguru Shankaracharya to this day. And same for Kanchi, we say Shankaracharya of Kanchi Pitha, or the Kanchi Shankaracharya they are called. So such acharyas abound to this day, and it is their fortune, it is their karuna, their daya, that we are able to practice what little dharma that we do, right, to this day. So they say, dhyana moolam guru, mantra moolam gurur vakyam. Anything that the guru says is a mantra. Dhyana moolam gurur murtihi. So the guru's form itself is worthy to be meditated upon, right? Moksha moolam gurov padam. The guru's feet itself is the best way to get to moksha, right? So these gurus, this acharya parampara, this guru parampara from today's Mahasannidhanam and Sannidhanam, from today's acharyas all the way back to Narayana or Dakshinamurti, it is this parampara's daya, their karuna, that we have been able to learn whatever little we can do today. If we do Gita Jnana Yajnas today, if we do Upanishad classes today, if we do other Vedanta courses, even with Chinmaya or Arsha Vidya Gurukula, which are recently established organizations, right? So even to present day organizations, the only reason we are able to learn any of this is because this entire Guru Parampara exists and because they passed down this knowledge perfectly. And this Guru Parampara is a very interesting one. Shankaracharya actually writes a shloka. He says there is one theoretical mythical stone called the Philosopher's Stone. If you guys have read Harry Potter, it's mentioned in the first book. It was actually studied too in terms of alchemy. So in the Middle Ages, most chemical advances in the West or in Europe were actually made trying to look for this Philosopher's Stone. So this stone, what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to turn anything it touches into gold. So any common metal, even if it touches like iron or pewter or brass, it turns anything it touches into gold. So Shankaracharya says that this guru is greater than even that Philosopher's Stone. It's called a Sparshavedhi in Sanskrit. Why? This Sparshavedhi can turn a useless piece of iron into gold. That's true. But this gold cannot turn anything else into gold. This gold will remain gold. But a guru, what he can do is he can take a dull student and make him into a very smart person. But that person is now capable of becoming a guru and passing on that knowledge to someone else. The Philosopher's Stone can only make something else gold, but that gold cannot make something else gold. A guru, though, can make someone into a jnani who can then make someone else a jnani, thus allowing this jnana sravanti to flow, right? And depending on how those acharyas realized and experienced it, they presented it to us in different ways. So another great guru, another great scholar, Appaya Dikshita, writes in one of his books called, in a book, he says, Adhigata Bhida Purvacharya Nupetya Sahasradha Saridiva Mahi Bhedan Samprapya Shauri Padodgata Jayati Bhagavatpada Shriman Mukhambuja Nirgata Janana Harani Suktir Brahmadvayeka Parayana. Janana Harani Suktir Brahmadvayeka Parayana, he writes. So what he says is basically, so there is a sukti that has flowed from Bhagavatpada's mouth, that is Brahmadvayeka Parayana, that professes Advaita. So there is an Advaita Jnana that has flowed from Shankara Bhagavatpada Acharya's speech, right? So what happened though over the course of time, Purvacharyan Upetya Sahasradha Adhigata Bhida. So having reached these other acharyas along the way, this Jnana Ganga, so this Jnana Sravanti split into different tributaries, just as a river, when it flows over uneven ground, just as it splits, right? The one flow splits into different tributaries. In that same way, the same Ganga of knowledge that flowed from Bhagavatpada Acharya's mouth, coming to different acharyas, it took a different form. So that is the method that this jnana flows in. This shloka is the Mangalacharana of a book called Siddhantalesha Sangraha. In it, Appaya Dikshita basically reconciles all the different ways that Advaita has presented itself through the eyes of different acharyas, which is why he does this particular Mangalacharana. So all these acharyas have presented all these teachings in all these different ways. At the end of the day, the teaching is the same. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. Now we might ask, if the teaching is one, then why does all of this writing need to be done, right? Why these Puranas, why these Brahma Sutras, why these texts, why all these commentaries? Because Shankaracharya also answers that in his Shatashloki. He says Sambalam Rodamanam is a shloka. So when a child is crying, he's hungry, right? The mother brings a banana to him. He says, I don't want a banana. So the mother takes that away and brings an apple, right? He says, I don't want an apple. She brings, I don't know, grapes. He says, I don't want a grape. She brings dates. He says, I don't want dates. At the end of the day, she brings a mango. He says, okay, good, I'll eat this. So couldn't she just have brought the mango in the beginning? We don't know what the sadhaka needs. At the end of the day, the child's hunger needs to be appeased. But in what method, if he is fed, that hunger will be appeased, changes from child to child. In the same way, different sadhakas will understand and interpret things in different ways. Different things are easier to digest and swallow for people than others. So out of the mercy, to ensure that no one gets left out, all of these acharyas took this much time to teach us in all these different ways, whether it be through stotras like Dakshinamurti Stotra, whether it be through Upanishad Bhashyas like the ones that Adi Shankaracharya wrote, whether it be through Karikas like the ones that Gaudapadacharya wrote, whether it be Vartikas on Bhashyas like that which Padmapada and Sureshwaracharya wrote. So all of these different types of teachings, right? And not just these Vedantic teachers, right? We have people like Valmiki. Valmiki is Kavikala Guru, right? Can anyone say that Valmiki is not a Jagat Guru? Because his teachings through Ramayana are applicable for every single human on this earth. To be like Rama, to be like Sita, to be like Hanuman is something that, people can dream of. So these great ideals, these great dharmic teachings have been passed down in so many different ways. Ramayana presents it in one way. Bhagavata presents it in one way. Mahabharata does it one way. Vedas do it one way. Smriti does it one way. Right? So all of this diversity is born from the Guru's mercy. So the Guru Parampara's mercy is the one alamba that we have to grow as sadhakas, as aspirants that want to get that final knowledge of Brahma Vidya, right? So to that, the main thing we have to do is twofold. One, yasya deve para bhakti yatha deve tatha guru. This is Veda's order. So have bhakti towards the Guru the way you have towards Bhagavan. Number two, not just having bhakti towards the Guru, but we need to carry out what the Guru says. So what have our Jagat Gurus told us? Study, learn, live your life according to Dharma. So the best Guru Dakshina we can give our teachers, in addition to whatever monetary offerings we can do or whatever seva we can do, is making sure we live our life in accordance with the teachings that those gurus have given us, right? So Shankaracharya has given us teachings that are very straightforward. Ma kuru dhanajana yauvana garvam. Do not get prideful about either your age or your status in society or your wealth. Simple teaching. None of us can complain that we didn't understand it or we didn't get a chance to do it. Geyam Gita Nama Sahasram Dhyayam Shripati Rupamajasram Neyam Sajjana Sange Chittam Deyam Dina Janayacha Vittam. Geyam Gita, learn the Bhagavad Gita or learn songs, sing Bhagavan's name. Dhyayam Shripati Rupamajasram, meditate upon Bhagavan's form, whether it be Ganapati, Devi, Vishnu, Shiva, meditate upon Bhagavan's form. Neyam Sajjana Sange Chittam, make sure that you spend your time in good quality, in Satsangatya. Deyam Dina Janayacha Vittam, give your wealth to Dinas, give your wealth to those in need. Do not hoard wealth, do not be greedy. These are all simple teachings that Bhagavad Pada told. These are not even like teachings about jnana or scholastic things. These are things that we can incorporate into our daily lives to be better people, let alone better sadhakas or better mumukshus, right? So these simple teachings, Vyasa Maharshi says, right? Shlokardhena pravakshyami yaduktam grandhakotibhi paropakara punyaya papaya parapidanam. So people asked him, you wrote so many things and you wrote so many books. Can you please sum this up in one shloka? He says, no, I'll do it in half a shloka. Doing good to other people is punya. Doing bad to other people, hurting other people is papa. Do punya, don't do papa. Simple teaching. We can try to incorporate this in our day-to-day lives too, can't we? So our best Guru Dakshina that we can give back to teachers in Guru Parampara is make sure we learn the things that they took so many pains to lay out for us in such a palatable manner, and to make sure that we live our lives in a way that they wanted us to live us in. And in that, if we do that, we will do justice to celebrating Guru Purnima and to all the Gurus by whose grace we have become what we are today. So offering my namaskaras to the Guru Parampara, to my teachers. So my teachers who have taught me whatever Vedanta or whatever little I know, the teachers who have taught me that, doing namaskara to all of them, including our parents and elders, right? Because without the parents too, we would not even learn our letters. So up to our parents, right? To our gurus that teach us other things, whether it be Gita or Shastra or Vedanta or Sangita, all gurus who in the end want us to be good, want us to be well, doing namaskara to all of them. I will stop here. Mangalam Kosalendraya Mahani Gunatmani Chakravarti Tanujaya Sarvabhauma Mangalam Veda Vedanta Vedyaya Meghashya Malamurtaye Umsam Mohana Rupaya Punya Shloka Yamangalam Ito Nrasimha Parato Nrasimha Yato Yato Yamitato Nrasimha Bahir Nrasimho Hridaye Nrasimha Nrasimhamadim Sharanam Prapadye.
Thank you, Lalitji. It was really good. Can you take some questions? We'll ask if anybody who has any questions. Sure. Yeah. Anybody has any questions, please go ahead and ask.
This might be a very basic question. Can you briefly talk about what Sanatana Dharma is?
Yeah. So Sanatana, the phrase Sanatana means that which is very ancient. Dharma. So dharma is that which has been ordained by the Vedas. So the way of life that is prescribed by the Vedas. So Sanatana Dharma is that knowledge that is prescribed by the Vedas that has been passed down since time immemorial. So Arsha Vangmaya is a good way of saying it. So the summation of the knowledge that is presented by the teachings of rishis is a good way of summarizing it.
Just curious, do we find any conflicting information in the Vedas? So or in the ancient preachings of these gurus? Is there any conflicting information where one guru says a particular thing, whereas the other guru contradicts, or with the times the information might have changed, right?
So there are different so the main place where differences pop up for us in Sanatana Dharma is when we interpret things, right? So for example, we have the famous word of the Vedas, Tattvamasi. So no one disputes what the Vedas say. So the famous sentence is Tattvamasi in the Vedas. So the way Advaitans interpret it, so Tat is being Ishvara, Tvam is being you, Asi. So the root of the Chaitanya that is you is the root of the Chaitanya that is Ishvara. Now what Vishishtadvaitan says, they say Tat Tvamasi means Tat Vat Tvamasi. You are like that. So not you are Ishvara, but you are like Ishvara. Then Dvaitan say Tadiyas Tvamasi or Atat Tvamasi. So like this, the sentence is the same, interpretations differ. That's one thing. In terms of differing teachings, that kind of is seemingly, I think it could be misread that way maybe. What happens is we have different types of sadhakas. So our gurus, they tailor their teachings to a certain type. So what works for one person does not always work for another, right? So even in Gita, we see actually Krishna himself seemingly contradicts himself several times. That's why Arjuna says, you're confusing me, tell me one thing. So Bhagavan first says, you need to do karma for sure. In the next one, he says karma sannyasa is, very much needs to be done as the greatest thing. So these seem to be conflicting, but what Sanatana Dharma does is it teaches different things for different people depending on where they are. So there is no conflict per se. It's just meant for a different audience. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. This is really helpful.
Any more questions, please?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why does Shankaracharya have like those markings on his forehead?
So the 3 lines on the forehead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is vibhuti or bhasma. So it's actually a good chance to talk about it. People, a lot of these days seem to be, we think that putting bhasma is a Shaiva symbol or a symbol of Shiva. putting on bhasma is a Vaidika sampradaya. So if you're in the Vedic tradition, you put bhasma on your forehead. Why? Veda sampradaya is a yajna sampradaya. So the entire Sanatana Dharma or Vedas, a lot of it talks about karma kandas and rituals, which all are centered around yajnas. Yajna prasada comes in the form of ash. So putting that ash on our forehead is a way of showing that we follow the Vaidika Sampradaya. So not if whether you're Shaiva or Vaishnava or Shakta, putting that ash on your forehead the way Shankaracharya does is common. Now, why do we put 3 lines? 3 lines because the 3 mantras, right? So there are Rung mantras in the Veda, Yajur mantras in the Veda, and Sama mantras in the Veda. So by putting that bhasma as 3 lines, we say this is the prasada of the yajna that has been prescribed by the 3 Vedas. So that's why Shankaracharya and all teachers, even the gurus here too, up to me on a good day, I think I only have 2 lines here. I meant to have 3. All the way. So we have 3 lines of bhasma on our forehead. It's a Vaidika sampradaya thing. It's not a Shaiva or a secular. It's not a sect. It's a Vaidika thing overall for Sanatana.
Lalitana?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Why did Vyasa Maharshi turn the 3 mantras Rik, Sama, Yajus into 4 Vedas? Why?
So the thing is, Veda is a very big corpus of literature, right? It'll take several days to tell if you tell it from front to end. Not just days, maybe even months, right? And different shakas too, right? So what happened was the human lifespan. So you have to study a Veda, right? So 80 to 100-year lifespan that we have doesn't suffice to study all of this. So if you separate it into 3 Vedas and then into 4 Vedas and then even then separate those Vedas into other fragments, it becomes much easier for different parts of society to study different fragments of it. That way making sure that the entire Veda is preserved and everyone gets one part. Now, how do you make sure people don't miss out on anything? That's why Vyasa Maharshi divided the shakhas into such a way that each shakha is complete on its own. That's why each shakha has its own Upanishad, or each shakha has a certain Upanishad prescribed to it. So each of those shakhas contains the sum total knowledge from the Vedas that one person would need to do well in life. So that's why the Vedas needed to be divided up into the different divisions.
Thank you, Anna.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Why did he name those mantras Rig, Sama, and Yajus?
Yeah,
It's
so
confusing.
Rik means praise, like the words Rik means praise, Yajus means sacrifice, Sama means that which is sung. So Rik mantras are generally praises to devatas. So they were called Rik mantras. Then mantras that are generally used for sacrifices, right? So Pushkara Parane, Pushkara Dandeshta Saggasteriya, right? So there are certain words in Vedas that are like sacrificial orders. So those they call Yajus because those are used to perform rituals. Then there's Samas. Sama mantras are actually just Rig mantras that are sung. So the same mantra, so the words will be the same as the Rigveda mantra, but where Rig mantra only has 3 or 4 swaras, this Sama mantra will have 14 swaras. So when that Rig mantra is sung, when it is done in Sama, it becomes a Sama mantra. So that's how the 3 Veda mantras got their name.
Thank you.
Anna,
Mm.
I have another question.
Mm.
So, Brahmarshis and Maharshis, they all have these knowledges, right?
Yeah.
They have all kinds of knowledges, right?
Yeah.
Do they teach humans or only like people that are sannyasis?
No, they'll teach anyone. They'll teach
Or they teach anyone?
Yeah. Remember this, teaching is open to everyone. The method of teaching is always streamlined depending on what will best suit the person, right? Not everyone learns the same way. So the teaching is open to everyone. The methods of teaching vary depending on who the person is. That's the way Sanatana Dharma has always worked.
I guess there are no more questions. Thanks, Andy. Thank you very much. Really appreciate. Thank you, Andy. Thanks from AHT management. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.